It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin, and we are kicking off our Rankings 2.0 series this week. We got done drafting the class, mock draft style, and now it is 5 weeks of pure film grinding. Collin, are you doing okay after 1 week?
No. No, yeah, this is where you really learn what these players are and how much you have learned over the year versus, how much is going to change going forward, because you see these guys and you look at, whatever you can during the season, whether that's condensed games, whether that's like every run from this game, or, God forbid, you just got to watch the highlights because there's nothing else out there. And then usually by the end of the season, we get a week removed and the tape starts showing up, and then you can really dig in and make some informed opinions about players based on down multiple angles and exactly how you want, like what flags you want to plant and how exactly you want to feel about these guys come draft season. And quarterbacks are, one of the more fun ones because they touch the ball every play and like something's usually happening versus some other guys you're watching them, block a lot or run a lot of routes and not do a whole lot and get seen 6 times in a game. So at least, start out with something a little bit of fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I said it, but it's in the name of the episode, so you already know. We're talking quarterbacks first. We talked wide receivers first in the summer, but we decided let's go back to starting with quarterbacks because this is going to be the group that we probably feel the best about in terms of who's in, who's out. And it was actually just so, perfectly timed that Drew Aller opts to go back to Penn State for now. I'm not saying like he couldn't change his mind if they go on a run here, but for now, he put out the statement, the social media graphic, like we're coming back, we're running it back. So we kind of have a better understanding of what this class looks like. I'm not going to lie. Drew Aller was one of the names I was more excited to watch in this class. So now, a bit based on what I saw from 2023. So now I'm like, we're kind of scrambling a little bit. The writing has been on the wall. We've talked a lot about it. This isn't the best quarterback class you've ever come across. In fact, might be one of the worst. And after watching film, Collin, what did you see? High level.
I was underwhelmed, I'll say that, by the overall class. I think, or I guess I was whelmed by the class, properly whelmed. All of these guys were about where I expected them to be. So I don't know. I want to dig in just to see how you're feeling, like, well, what each guy does, but in totality, I feel like this is going to be, these teams like the Raiders and the Giants are now losing a bunch of games and going to expect to take a quarterback number 1, number 2, number 3. And it's like, I don't know if any of these guys are worth that.
Yeah, that's the question. And we're going to talk a lot about, I think, the Giants and the Raiders today because just of the nature of how things are playing out and with those two teams currently sitting on top and some of the noise around one of the players, at least with both of those teams right now. So yeah, we'll get into a little bit of the big picture stuff with the draft, even this far out. But let's dive into it. We're doing top 5s for quarterbacks, probably going to expand that out for running backs and wide receivers. I don't remember how many we did last year, but it feels like that kind of year for at least running backs. Quarterbacks, we maybe didn't need to do a top 5. I don't know. That's all I'm saying. But let's start with number 5. Would you like to go first? Or would you like me to go first?
I'm gonna take Dillon Gabriel here with my 5th pick. Gabriel. So I guess I'll ask, is he in your top 5?
He's not.
Okay. So Gabriel to me was somebody that I don't know, like, if I love the traits. He ran this Oregon offense that we saw Bo Nix in last year. And it's like copy paste, the same exact offense. And Dillon Gabriel is doing a lot of the same things Bo Nix was doing at a little bit of a lower level, I would say. And we were not super high on Nix last year. So you look at a player who is now in his 6th year of college, 3 years at UCF, transferred over to Oklahoma, 2 years there, transferred over here to Oregon, and put together a little bit worse of a season this year than he did at Oklahoma last year. 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, 6 picks. And it's like, okay, it's a guy that makes decent decisions, that can move around a little bit. I feel like that's about what you're going to get with Dillon Gabriel. He's got solid accuracy, but it seems like even more of his throws are at or behind the line of scrimmage than Nix's throws were. It seems like we're not pushing the ball very much. And when things are out of structure, the accuracy kind of falls off a little bit. So I don't love Gabriel, but he sits here at 5 for me.
Yeah, I remember you had Gabriel in your top 5 in the summer, I believe. And I mean, he had a fantastic season. Heisman finalist, like Oregon's number 1. We'll get to see him in the playoff. So I was excited to watch him and
same
kind of find out, how did he improve over the course of this season to get to the point where he is now. And I mean, I will say I was pleasantly surprised by Gabriel's film because when you look at a player that's in his 6th year and is undersized and has never, he's been good he was good at Oklahoma, but never like great. It was sort of like coming into this year, like, what are we expecting out of Gabriel? And I thought he did his part in this Oregon offense. I totally agree with you that I feel like it was a very good Bo Nix impression. Like they were doing the same sorts of things. Gabriel was handling that. And there were moments where Gabriel was kind of flashing some skill. I mean, very good player on the run. You see him hit some kind of ridiculous throws on the run once in a while. Occasional, layered throws, specifically in the red zone. I thought he had a few really nice throws in the games that I watched in the red zone area. But in totality, when you look at this player, 6 foot, 200 pounds, an older quarterback, still not really transcending the confines of this offense in a meaningful way, it's hard for me to rank him highly in terms of where am I comfortable taking this player in the NFL draft. So I have him as an early day 3 quarterback right now. I think he's a very interesting day 3 option. And he is my number 6 quarterback as of right now.
Yeah, I also don't like his deep ball. Like, it feels like he is often underthrowing guys into, like, sometimes it's like into pass interference, which is kind of nice. It's like, oh, maybe he's going back shoulder there. I think he just doesn't have enough juice to like lead these guys, especially with the elite athletes that this Oregon team had on the outside this year. It's like, I want to see you air it out. I want to see you, get that ball in their hands on the run, let them beat the defense. Just wasn't really happening for me. So yeah, number 5 here with Dillon Gabriel.
I believe I'm confirming this on the fly. Yes, it was reported that Dillon Gabriel has accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl.
Ooh.
So if he opts to, depending on what happens in the playoff, if he opts to fulfill that and shows up there, that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
Because I think that's a great environment for a player like this to show up and maybe like Bo Nix did, like Michael Penix did. I mean, that's a little bit of a different tier.
Yeah.
But like those players did last year, kind of show up and maybe make a little bit of a name for himself as not just the smaller, older quarterback. Like maybe there's room for him for a team to fall in love with him. But
kind of reminds me of Matt Corral a little bit.
Man, what a name. Matt Corral.
Just like
is the XFL still a thing? Is he still doing it?
I think they combined with the USFL.
Okay.
And made like a super league.
Super league. Wow. Yeah. If that's on this spring, I gotta get one Matt Corral game every year.
See what's up with him and there's a receiver that won MVP last year. I can't think of. Anyway.
Hakeem Butler?
There it is.
Is that it?
Yep.
Man, legend. Iowa State.
Real nice.
All right. So Dillon Gabriel, you're number 5. And let me preface this by saying I'm going to say my number 5 quarterback, and then I'm going to say where he's graded for me. And this will make more sense. But my number 5 quarterback in the class is Carson Beck. And I'm assuming, based off the fact that you didn't have him in your top 5 coming into the year, that you certainly don't have him there now.
Yeah, yes, you would be correct.
So you were ultimately spot on with your evaluation of him from 2023. And there were some glaring.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were trying to champion this player as kind of the number 1 guy in this class coming into the year. And from my perspective, that's where I was as well. But I was pretty adamant on our summer scouting quarterback show. Like, this isn't really an endorsement of Beck's talent as being the number 1 quarterback. It's more of an indictment on this class as a whole. And so I think for Beck, what I wanted to see this year was, are you getting outside of the confines of this offense? Are you playing a little bit more out of structure, loosening up a little bit? Are you playing more on time? Because even in this short passing game system at Georgia, he was still late on a ton of throws last year. So want to see that speed up a little bit. And then can he just take a general jump forward in terms of making some big plays? I think that was something that was missing from 2023 as well. Those truly like stop and pause the film and be like, holy shit, that was crazy. He didn't do any of those things this year. Like, he didn't do any single thing that I wanted him to do this year to claim hold of this quarterback class. In fact, he only got worse this year from what we saw last year. He ends this season, the regular season, 3,466 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, 12 picks. So about 500 yards less passing, 4 more touchdowns, but 6 more picks. And I mean, getting into the film, like what happened here? Like, what was going on? Really, what I saw was just more of what I saw last year. And I think he was just kind of paying the price for operating in the same fashion that he did last year. And I think that ultimately, like, for me, says I don't have a lot of confidence in him. I don't see him growing from year to year. I see some pretty negative, red flags on his film. But that being said, it is telling of this quarterback class that he still is a top 5 player for me. And he's coming in with a borderline day 3 grade for me at this point. And that is top 5 for me in this class. I think the reason I'm still putting him in this spot over guys like Gabriel or anybody else past him is just maybe there's still some upside that's in there. Like, maybe an NFL team is willing to roll the dice and say, what happened here? Like, he's got the frame, he's got the athletic skill for a player at this size. We've seen some flashes from him at points during his college career. Maybe there's something in there, but this thing went from, he's a fringe first rounder for me to he's maybe a fringe day 2 guy at this point for me. So that's how far Beck has fallen.
Yeah, Beck, he I've said this before. It's like he doesn't have a trait that wows me. Like I at least want one of like these guys to have a trait that wows me. And to be fair, like Dillon Gabriel doesn't either. So like that's what we're looking at in this quarterback class is a lot of these guys just don't have like a quote unquote superpower. And these guys that lead NFL offenses need to be the best athletes like on earth, and they need to be able to process these things, and they need to be able to get this ball out fast. And Beck does a lot of things decent, but I don't think he does anything like very well. I think he delivers the ball at an intermediate level pretty well. I think that he can lead a guy accurately and get it out in front so they can catch and run easily. I think he can find holes in zone pretty well. I think he'll be a good career backup. Like you said, he'll be a good day 3 guy. A team can take a chance on him, see how he looks in camp, and go from there. But as of now, I just don't have a lot of faith that Beck can be a starter for any time in the league outright.
Yeah, this class, and we'll get into it as we go on, of course, but like I was thinking a lot about 2022 before I jumped into this. That was the Kenny Pickett year, right? 2022.
Right.
Like, because it has that sort of vibe before we jumped into all this. And like I don't think this class is that bad because there's a few guys at the top that give me a little bit of hope, like more hope than I had in a guy like Pickett or Willis. But after that group, it just falls off a cliff, and we'll get through it. But a guy like Beck perfectly kind of sums that up, where it's like I'm putting him here at number 5, and it's almost by default, just based on the fact that there's just not a lot of competition past the last 3 guys in this group of quarterbacks.
Yeah, the 2022 draft, 3rd round, low-key pretty good.
Yeah,
just taking a look at it. Yeah. Like Brian Robinson, Nick Cross, Kirby Joseph.
Oh, hell yeah.
Sean Ryan, Rashad White, Terrell Bernard, Jalen Tolbert, Malik Willis, GOAT, Nakobe Dean. I mean, hey, just saying.
Don't need good quarterbacks to have a good draft class. I mean,
that's right. Bunch of good linebackers and old linemen. And come on.
That's all you need. All right, number 4 for you, 2025
is Cam Ward. So Cam Ward, quarterback out of the U. Do you have him in your top 5?
Yes, he's higher.
Okay. So
Cam Ward. We should maybe wait.
Okay, we can wait then. Oh wait, who's your number 4? I feel like we might get into a thing here though.
Yeah, if we do get into a thing, we can just crack this wide open. Okay. But my number 4 is Quinn Ewers.
Okay, I feel like we should wait.
So we should. So should we just crack the egg?
Let's just crack the egg. Do you want
to talk about Cam first?
We can talk about Cam first. So
okay, go ahead.
I talked about guys needing a superpower with to be a starting quarterback in this league, and Cam Ward's superpower might just be that he's cool. Like I think like he has aura. Is that a superpower? Where
yeah.
Cam drops back and he's like cool as a cucumber, and then he like kind of pops around and then throws a dart. And he's got like a good to great arm where he can make a lot of different throws, where he can layer it over people. I really like his touch that he can put on throws. This is his 5th year. He started his first 2 at Incarnate Word, then went to Washington State for 2 years, transferred into Miami for his final year, and had a great season. I think he was a Heisman finalist also, right?
Just missed the cut.
Well, he should have been over Dillon Gabriel. He had 4,100 yards, 36 passing touchdowns, 7 picks. He can move a little bit. He's not super mobile. He's a big guy. He's like a thick player. He's 6'2", 220. But yeah, he gets the ball out slower. He's got a 2.9 time to throw. You can kind of see that with him kind of bouncing around back there and buying time a lot, but he thrives off schedule is the thing, where he can, like, when he makes those plays, it's not like Dillon Gabriel where it feels like it gets a little weird when you get off schedule. It feels like he's always under control, and that's where that coolness factor comes into play. So I actually like Cam Ward. a decent amount. I just feel like there's not a ton of upside with Cam Ward. I feel like kind of what you see is what you get.
Yeah, I can understand that point of view. Cam Ward is my number one quarterback in the class.
All right.
And so this is the nature of this class. Like we're already going to get into this conversation because of how these guys are and how different of, how slim maybe the margins are with some of these guys. But for me, how do I end up with Cam Ward at number one? Well, first of all, like before we get into that, I do want to point out the fact that like one of the coolest stories in college football that you're probably going to find, an unranked recruit in 2020 that, like you said, ends up at FCS Incarnate Word for 2 years, has 4,600 yards passing and 47 touchdowns in his second year there, transfers to the FBS with Washington State. He's there for 2 years, declares for the draft last year, and then decides, never mind, I'm going to transfer again to a big program and go to Miami and try to really cement myself in the next quarterback class. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what he did. 4,100 yards passing, 36 touchdowns, 7 picks this year. A couple of fun quotes. Coach Cristobal described him as an alpha leader. So when you talk about aura, he's got the aura and he's got the personality to lead a football team. And he says that his mentality on the field is, quote, I don't give an expletive. You can fill in whichever expletive you prefer in that sentence. I'm not sure which one he actually said. But, I mean, incredible personality. I mean, he's got some like real quotes. If you just like go searching for Cam Ward articles and like pull some quotes, you're going to get some real gems from him. He seems like an awesome guy. Teammates really resonated with him this year. But what do you get on the field with Cam Ward? I feel like how I ended up with him as number one is that he just offers something that I don't think you're getting in most other quarterbacks in this class. Like you said, kind of capped, like what you see is what you get, like he is what he is. And to some extent, I agree with that. But I do think what you see is a quarterback that's not afraid to just let it rip. Like he's gunslinger mentality. Like I see a little bit of like Jordan Love in his game where he's just getting outside of structure. He's got kind of playing his own way and he's just kind of letting that thing rip. And that's not a comp because I don't love that as a 1-for-1, but like you
comped him. You said it.
There's shades of Jordan Love in his game. That's the buzzword. So, but big arm, not afraid to use it, can push the ball down the field and outside of the numbers with ease. I mean, he can just rip it. He gets it outside on these deep outs, no problem. Far side, doesn't matter. He's letting it fly. And he's a playmaker. I mean, you said it. He thrives outside of structure. He occasionally does a little bit too much, and that's something we'll talk about with a couple of these guys. But, trying to make a big play, and sometimes it goes the wrong way, and sometimes it's a massive, dart touchdown that, not many guys in this class could make that throw. And that's kind of how I end up with Cam Ward at number one. I just think he offers you something in terms of arm strength, in terms of touch, like you said, a lot of great touch on his film, pretty decent feel for pressure in the pocket. And of course, just some jaw dropping throws on his film. So I think if there's one quarterback I'm willing to bet on in this group, it's Cam Ward.
If I was a GM and like I was on the hot seat, I probably am drafting Cam Ward. Because I do feel like he's absolutely the safest prospect. All of the other guys have a lot of question marks around them, and I guess that might be what is bringing me to them, because those question marks, if they answer them right, could end up being like very good players. But Cam Ward feels like you could plug him into an offense today and he can be a good player. So I can, like you said, there's very slim margins here, and the difference between number 1 and number 4 are very close. And it's not because all these guys like blew us away. It's just like, where do you value like the drawbacks versus the, so that's where we are right now, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I do want to color it in a little bit too for me, because like, he is my number 1 quarterback, but that's not to say, I think he's, wow, like this was amazing film. Like there are certainly weaknesses in his game that prevent him from being, in my opinion, like in the same tier as the guys we had last year. Like he's not even close to the top 2 guys. I think my pre-draft analysis of Jaden Daniels, he's close there. I still had Daniels higher.
Yeah.
He's more in line with like Michael Penix for me. And that comes because when you're a gunslinger, what does that mean? It means you're slinging the rock, and sometimes it's like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like there are some truly like staggeringly bad decisions on his film. Like the worst one that I think we talked about it during the season when it happened, is the one where he's rolling out right and just across his body and across the field throws a jump ball into triple coverage. And it's like, we got to get this out of the game. Like get this out of the game, and I'll feel a lot better about projecting you to be a potentially, high-end NFL starter.
Yep.
Also streaky as a passer, the accuracy ebbs and flows. Like he will get on a hot streak, and then all of a sudden it kind of falls off, and then you're going down after down where he's just missing throws. So he's got a little bit of that hot and cold. Good deep ball, but I wouldn't call it a great deep ball. I think he's got a tendency to miss guys long. I still think it's a positive element to his game, but it's not elite like a player like Jaden Daniels. And then one of those weird things, like a lot of batted balls. And he's a guy that's going to flex some different arm angles and try to do things kind of that way. And I don't know if that plays a part in it, but it was one of those things where after it showed up like 4 times, I was like, all right, this is just a part of your game. Like you're getting balls batted enough that I need to write it down. So certainly, like I said, not a player that is, let's take him first overall and not look back. Like I think he has a chance to go first overall in this draft class, given the nature, but not a player that I have graded that highly.
Also, he leads all of the guys on my list in big time throws, that's, I guess, what is the thing with Cam Ward, where he is willing, like as a gunslinger, you have the drawback of this guy might throw it into triple coverage, but you also have this guy's going to thread the goddamn needle every once in a while, and it's going to be spectacular. And that's the Cam Ward superpower of like, yeah, I'm not really interested in what you guys can do. I'm interested in what I can do. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not.
And I do want to point out as well, because, 3 programs, 5 years, he will be just shy of 23 when he is drafted. So he is older, but he's not the oldest quarterback in this group even. So, all right. So now
Quinn Ewers.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about Quinn Ewers first?
So I have Quinn Ewers number 2.
Okay.
But I went first with Ward, so I'll have you go first with Ewers.
All right. Let me take a sip. Lock in. So, okay. Quinn Ewers. I am just done. Like, I have been waiting for 3 years. We have been talking about Ewers for 3 years, basically at this point. Like really for 2 years here at Camp Dynasty, thinking he was going to be in the draft class last year opts to go back. Okay, don't hate the decision. Like, I thought really competitive quarterback group last year. Didn't think he was going to factor in at the top end of the class. So sure, go back, make your mark in a weaker class, and maybe even go first overall. And I just feel like we keep getting the same player. I feel like year after year, you're sitting there like wanting and waiting for Quinn Ewers to take the next step, and it just doesn't happen. And that's not to say that like his film is just terrible, because it's not. Like, there are moments on his film, even from this year, that I sit there and say, wow, yeah, like I can still see it. But the problem is that's exactly what I said last year, and it's exactly what I said in the summer. So like, at some point I just give up. And I have him right now graded as a day 2 player. I think he is a flyer. I think if you're an NFL team, you're waiting until the second, maybe early third round, if he's available, to take the flyer on him, try to develop him in your scheme and your system and at the NFL level, because it just has not happened in college.
Yeah, I think I feel kind of similarly about Quinn Ewers. I hate to say it. Ewers, throw the ball. That's what I find myself thinking every time I'm watching Ewers tape. He drops back, hits the back foot, and I'm just like, throw it. And he's like sitting back there, and then he'll fire it late, and it'll be incomplete. Like, he's got a 2.5 time to throw, so obviously that's not every time. But it just seems like every time they're not doing a one read or half field read play, it's like he's sitting back there like patting the ball and waiting for something to happen. And this is especially evident on the Georgia tape, which is something you kind of, I at least will like grade you a little. That leans more into the curve for me, because I mean, Georgia sends all their guys to the NFL. They got 2 NFL guys that are going to go first round this year. So you look at that kind of team and it's like, dude, we got to get the ball out quick, because this team is coming after you. And I think that's the biggest flaw with Ewers. I think there's a lot of flaws with Ewers. I just like the arm talent is so tantalizing with Ewers that, like, if he gets to a spot that can cultivate him, I feel like we can see a pretty solid quarterback here. You almost have to get in there and like we rewire the brain a little bit. But the problem is there's not a ton of programs that can do that in the NFL. So you see it every once in a while where a journeyman quarterback will end up somewhere. Like, you see like Darnold this year with the Vikings, and it's a similar idea. Darnold was a better prospect, but it's like a guy that can move around a little bit, that has a huge arm, that just makes a bonehead decisions. And it's like, I think Ewers could be that player, but Darnold didn't work for 6 years for a variety of teams because there's no support structure. And I think Ewers, if he goes to a place that takes a chance on him and he's supposed to like fix their franchise, I think he absolutely won't be able to do that. I think he's going to struggle, and he's going to kind of, I mean, look how he looked this year, where he's given the keys and he crashes the car. But and Texas wasn't bad, but Ewers didn't look as good as he looked last year, even because he had a worse supporting cast. So I guess it's like, he has a big arm. He can make every throw on the field. There are flashes of exceptional play, but there's also just like bad accuracy sometimes. The timing is off a lot. And I just think, even as my number 2 quarterback, like, he needs to be in the right spot to work. And I think that goes for a lot of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, the point you made about Darnold, it's like 6 years he was nothing, and then 7th year he was amazing. Like, that is why I can't completely fade a guy like Ewers, because I mean, maybe like 4 years ago I would have, but we have seen the like quarterback rehabilitation in the NFL be a thing. Like Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. I mean, all of these guys getting fresh starts and becoming something. And I think a guy like Ewers maybe is a little bit further away than those players were. I mean, obviously Baker was a first overall pick. Sam Darnold, top 3, and I liked both of those players. It's a long time ago. I'm trying to remember, but I know that I liked both of those players more than I like Ewers right now coming out. So it's going to be a bumpy and long road for him, I think, at the NFL level. If he gets an opportunity, it's going to be probably in a few years from now. If somebody is willing to take the chance on him to get him in for 3 years and try to develop him behind someone, I think that's his best chance. But I mean, you're not wrong to still see the best parts of Ewers because they are still there.
And I think I agree with you. I don't know if there's any quarterback, like, save 1.5, that are ready to, like, walk into an offense today.
Yeah.
And take over. So like we've kind of mentioned a few times, this class is like doesn't have the guy where he's going to come in and change your franchise. Last year we were spoiled. We had, 3 guys that probably could have started day one. And now we're, iffy. So I guess we had 4 guys that could have started day one if you count Drake.
Because they did.
Yeah. So we had 3 that started day one. Drake May waited, and the Penix is, I don't know. He probably should be playing right now.
I think there's 5.
So anyway.
Yeah. Pretty intense juxtaposition from last year to this year with the quarterback group. I'll tell you that.
Seriously. We're not going to have 6 first-round quarterbacks this year. I can promise you that.
Yeah. All right. So number 4, or no, we're done with number 4.
No, number 3 we're on now.
So number 3, your number 3 is
Jalen Milroe.
And my number 3 is Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, I think it has to be.
Yeah.
Because there's nowhere else to put him. So I'll start with Milroe. We've had a bumpy ride with Milroe this year. Last year, he was brought into our lives as a interesting player that had a lot of defects. And, we talked ad nauseum about his benching last year and what he is as a player, and the offense change coming into 2024 and what that means for him as a prospect and as a player this year. Now, that being said, what did we see out of him this year? We anointed him in week 5 in that Georgia game. He threw for 374 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He also was great running the ball that game. We anointed him. We're like, this is going to be the guy. He's going to be the super flex guy. He's going to be, the Anthony Richardson of the class, et cetera, et cetera. And it basically fell apart at the seams 2 weeks later, and he never really came back together. So he was my QB1 at that point, and you just that was the flash in the pan, unfortunately. We thought that it was the beginning of something that he was building, and it turned out to be, he had 5 picks in 3 games after that. He ended the season with 4 picks against Oklahoma and Auburn. He was erratic with the ball. He has, tantalizing arm strength, and he's incredible running the ball. But outside of that, there just is this very incomplete, rough draft of a player.
Trying to put together my thoughts here, because this is a really tough one. Because in some ways, I don't think this was a bad year for Milroe. I don't necessarily look at this season as a step backward necessarily. Like a player like Carson Beck, where it's obviously a step backwards. Quinn Ewers, step backwards. I don't think this was a step backwards for Milroe, but for a player that is so developmental, to not see meaningful progression from year to year is almost like taking a step back. Where I had him in the, and it's funny because I had him at number 4 in the summer, and that was glass half full. I'm going to put him here because I feel like he has traits and flashes that not a lot of these guys have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna bet on him to develop even more this year. And he didn't do that, but he's still climbing my rankings and sitting at number 3. But like you said, that was, after a point in time where I was pretty adamant, like this is going to be my number 1 quarterback because of what he did in the Georgia game. And I watched the film back from that game, and like, it's great. I mean, he looked excellent in that game. And I just think you turn on Tennessee, which is only a few weeks later, and it's like watching a completely different player. I mean, it is just shocking how different he looks from game to game at points this year. So again, it's a player that is not ready to go. Like, you cannot draft Jalen Milroe and expect to get an early return, because, and I think we said that about Anthony Richardson as well. And Richardson just stepped in and looked good out the gate, but I think it is important to.
I don't think you can say Anthony Richardson looked up after this week.
The 4 games last year, when everybody kind of stopped and said, "Holy shit, I think he's already ready to go," and then obviously like the next year happens. So yeah, you're right. Like there's going to be flashes. Like if he plays, there's going to be flashes just because of how elite he is as a runner. And that is something that I feel like needs to be emphasized again, which is that he is an elite rushing threat from the quarterback position. I mean, it's incredible. His speed and his twitch at this size is special. So you have that player that has the, what we've come to, embrace as high floor with a rushing floor. But the passing side of his game is still so underdeveloped. And I saw the same things this year that I saw last year, which are flashes of greatness sandwiched between just what are we doing moments. And I think one of the most concerning parts of this year, and why I wasn't comfortable like completely sticking my neck out and just saying, F it, he's got enough, I've seen it, he's my number 1 quarterback. The reason I can't do that is because of how often he is late this year. Like so many times, even in that Georgia game, he's throwing to wide open players that have been, because of this scheme, they're exploiting areas of the field and getting players into open spaces. And Milroe is finding those guys, but he's even finding those players late. Even guys that are standing still, wide open, he's getting the ball to them a tick slower than I would hope for. So I'm not doubting that he can process the field, because you can see him getting through progressions in this offense. But I do still think there is a delay in his processing. And for a player that is not there on a consistent accuracy basis, that is a scary thought when you plug him into the NFL. So he's number 3 for me, developmental. I'm still comfortable with him fringe round 1. I think he's going to go higher than that probably in the NFL draft, but I think he fits best in a scenario where he can kind of just get picked late first, early second, sit, develop, no pressure on him as a top 10 pick or anything like that to perform immediately, though, we know how this thing goes.
Yeah, I was thinking about the top of the draft, and we know how things are shaping up with, the Giants and Vegas, and Tennessee needs a quarterback. And one of these teams is going to be left without a guy after the top 2 go. I think there's 2 that, we are hearing that 2 guys are going to go high. And it's like, is a team going to go out on a limb and draft Jalen Milroe really high because he's the only quarterback left and like he's shown some things as a dual threat guy? I hope not, because that's not what he needs, because then he's probably also going to get thrown in really early. But another thing that I noticed for Milroe is hold on to the ball. Like, not only are you turning it over through the air, but he also had 9 fumbles this year, which is like a lot of fumbles. And that comes on running the ball and on getting strip sacked. So if we're going to be, a dual threat guy, we got to at least secure the football when we're running it. And you got to be able to get out of harm's way when you're getting rushed. So there's some drawbacks to Milroe. There's the upside of Milroe, where it's like, he can make every throw on the field and he can, run the ball, and you get that dual threat. He had 900 yards on the ground and 20 rushing touchdowns this year. So there's the upside for Milroe, but the downside is I don't know if he is going to be a polished passer ever, and he sure isn't right now.
And this is a good point to make, to call out something that I've been wanting to talk about with a few of these guys, which is interceptions are not always a bad quarterback play.
Right.
Like, there were multiple times in the handful of games that I watched for several of these guys where you see a pick and you're like, well, that's not on him. Yep. Like that, it's like a wide receiver off his hands, up in the air, picked off. So that's why I appreciate that PFF has the turnover worthy play number, which kind of gives us a better idea of how often a quarterback is putting the ball into harm's way. Yeah. A guy like Cam Ward has 15 turnover worthy plays. And that's fairly high in terms of the overall.
Oh, let me tell you, Quinn Ewers has 17.
Yeah,
so.
I know. Yeah. So there's that side of it where like 7 picks, but 15 turnover worthy plays. In Milroe's case, 10 picks, 9 turnover worthy plays. His turnover worthy play rate actually stayed about the same from last year to this year. So on one hand, it looks like he got more careless with the ball or made more mistakes. But honestly, I saw a couple of picks in the games that I watched that I'm like, that's not on him really.
Yeah.
And so you can look at that and say, all right, like maybe there wasn't as much regression in that area as it looks on the page, which is another reason why we watch film and we don't just look at the box score. But
yep. And if you just throw 28 touchdowns and 3,000 yards, we can gloss over like the turnovers. Right. That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
Like if you make enough plays to offset it, then you can say, all right, yeah, whatever. Like he throws the ball in harm's way, like Cam Ward. Like, yeah, you put the ball in harm's way every once in a while, but the other 4,000 yards makes up for it. So.
Yep. You live with the Cam Ward turnover worthy plays. You live and you die by them. Yep. You can't die by Jalen Milroe turnover.
When you're throwing the ball 17 times a game with Jalen Milroe and you're running it with him, you can't have him throwing the ball in harm's way on one of those 17 tries. It's like, oh man, that's not what we're looking for here, Jalen.
All right, there's one player left, right?
There's one player left, and he's your number 2, and he's my number 1.
That's correct.
Shedeur Sanders.
Here he is.
This is the enigma of the class, I would say. Do you want to start with, since he's lower for you?
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
I think Cam Ward and Shedeur are like the same. Like I have identical grades on them right now. And I think you can see a lot of similarities in their games. Like a lot of what I'm going to say about Shedeur, I already said it about Cam Ward. Like really nice touch passes. Like and we talked about that in the summer. It's still showing up this year. I think he actually improved even, I would say, more accurate, better throwing deep down the field this year. That was a big area for me that I saw last year. Like, I think this needs to be improved. I think it did this year, and the numbers back that up. 41% completion percentage, 20 or more yards downfield last year. He's up to 47% this year. So film and stats kind of work together in that regard. He's an improviser. I mean, he can make plays outside of structure. And I don't think he has the same level of playmaker in him that Cam Ward does. I think they both have similar ways that they can get outside, escape pressure, make throws on the run. I think Shedeur is just less athletic. And I think he has, there are those bad sacks that he takes.
Yeah.
That are sometimes like he's got to get the spin move out of his repertoire. He's just not athletic enough for that. Like he tries to spin away from pressure and he gets caught up doing that so often because he's just not that quick. So that, you live and you die by that. In the same ways that Cam Ward will get way too deep and take a big sack every now and then. You're talking about the same thing with Shedeur. I think for me, the differentiator, or it's not even a differentiator. It's like pick which side you prefer. And this is how I ended up with Ward at number 1. I prefer a guy that has a bigger arm than a guy that has a worse arm and is maybe a little bit more careful. Like it's really the conversation of, do you want a better system quarterback? Or do you want a potential like X factor quarterback? And I think it's, a natural reaction to say, well, of course I want the X factor because that's what wins games in the NFL. But that's not always the case either. Like if you have a player like Cam Ward that's constantly putting the ball in harm's way, or at least enough that it's a problem, and then you have a guy like Shedeur that's probably not going to make every throw in the book, but he is incredibly accurate and he's incredibly careful with the football. Turnover worthy play rate is under 2% back-to-back years and down to 1.1% this year. So incredibly careful with the ball, incredibly accurate most of the time, and has some improviser in his game. I mean, it's easy to see why this is a name that we're talking about at the top of this class.
Yeah, so Shedeur, the way he ends up at number 1 for me is because of something you mentioned, is he takes care of the football. He moves the offense forward most of the time. There are the times where it's like really frustrating, a little bit of the similar experience that I had with Ewers, where I'm like, dude, get rid of the ball, hit the back foot, throw the ball. Now, on top of that, they have some like horrid route concepts in this Buffalo's offense. Where it's like he hits the back foot and he's looking on like a half field read. So you're running like flood to the left. And like there's 3 guys in the same spot. It's like, how does this happen? And it happened a lot. He was like, especially like the Nebraska game. He's taking a bunch of sacks and it's like, okay, but he's hitting his back foot and there's like nothing there for him. And then, you buy time and you move and whatever, and then he gets strip sacked. It's like, oh, Shedeur taking another strip sack. Now, could he do more outside of those kind of plays where he's buying time because, like, I want to get Travis Hunter the ball? Yes, he could absolutely do that because there are times where he'll lock in on number 12 and he'll throw it to him whether or not he's covered and he might have another option. Have we seen quarterbacks do that with varying success? We have, where you lock in on a number 1 wide receiver because they are more talented than anybody else you have in your team. But Shedeur has the accuracy. He has the throwing with movement. He doesn't have the athleticism that most quarterbacks in the NFL have right now. That's the big bugaboo for me with Sanders, where we're sitting there and it's like, I mean, I wish I could get 60 rushing yards out of you, but it just doesn't feel like that's going to happen. And whether or not he has that in his bag, I don't know, because he hasn't shown it in 4 years really. So I would like to see a little bit more of dual threat, but you can see, flashes of it every once in a while where The Baylor game, he ran a lot. He had 77 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. You saw it against like Texas Tech where he's moving around a little bit. But like you said, he's not twitchy athletic. He just kind of glides around, and sometimes it'll be like, oh, hey, surprising, Shedeur Sanders getting out there. But yeah, he's got a good arm. It's not astonishing, but he's putting the ball on the money a lot. And like you said, he takes care of the ball.
So the other thing too, we talked a lot about his mechanics in the summer. I thought they were better this year.
They looked a little cleaner.
Like the ball is still pretty low, but the feet look a lot better from what I remember from last year. So that was at least encouraging as well. Like, this is a player that, like, we have a lot of questions about the character, the environment, and honestly, one of the most surprising things about watching the quarterbacks this year for me was, like, going in, I was concerned about what happens to Shedeur outside of being in this ecosystem. Like, what happens when he's not this guy on this team?
Mm-hmm.
And I came out of this being like, get him out of there.
Yeah, 100%. I thought the same thing.
Like, you're all over it. The route concepts are terrible. The receivers outside of Travis Hunter are just straight up bad as well. I mean, there's just very little separation for.
Like, at least he'll have Wandale to throw to outside of Neighbors next year.
Well, and that's the other question was he's driving past Allegiant Stadium and he's putting the clip up on social media, but then he's playing catch with neighbors in the streets in New York.
Yeah, so random. I bet that just happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of buzz and question marks about what's going to happen with this draft and how will Deion get involved and how is that going to affect things? Like, I mean, which of these two spots do you prefer for him? Because I feel like they prefer Vegas.
I think both are. So what I'm wondering is, will they go to a spot because they hire Deion? Because, like, it feels like the Raiders, maybe Antonio Pierce, like, isn't the long-term guy, and maybe they get rid of him, bring in Deion, bring in Shedeur, have the whole show. While I don't think the Giants are, like, going to be so that ready to move on from Daboll, because I think the roster has been such a shit show for the last couple of years. So maybe that's the determining factor. But, like, at the end of the day, I don't think it's actually going to matter. Like, I don't think Deion's going to do the Manning thing where he's like, Shedeur's not playing for New York, where we're only going to Vegas. Like, it might, but I don't think there's a high chance that that's happening. If I were Shedeur, I would rather go to New York because at least I have, some weapons to throw to. Because, like, I know the Raiders have Brock Bowers and, like, Jacoby Myers, but, like, they have an ascending receiver corps and then, like, some draft capital, and I don't know. Both are not great. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I feel like because I see him more as a system sort of player, I feel like, I don't know. It's really hard.
Neither have a good system. That's the other problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. And, like, Brian Daboll, like, is he gonna be the coach next year?
Who's gonna be their offensive coordinator if Deion's the coach? That's what I care about.
Well, that's a great question because I don't have any confidence in Deion being an NFL head coach. I'm sorry. Like, the shtick works at the collegiate level, and he's done a great thing for that program, Colorado. But, like, based on what I've seen schematically, this is a recruiter and a promoter more than he
could be Dan Campbell.
Yeah. Well, that's true. He could just hire an excellent staff and just be a be the mascot, but
right.
I don't know. We'll see. It's gonna be wild.
It sounded so disheartening. Huh.
Well, it's just it's the combination of the quarterback class is weird.
Not that fun. Yeah.
And the teams on top are weird. And so it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's what makes it fun, because we don't know what's going to happen, and it is only December. So we have plenty of time to figure it out and talk about it. But let the record show, I prefer Cam Ward in New York, if that's how the chips will fall, if he will be a top 2 pick in this class, and Shedeur in Vegas. I'm going with that.
I feel like it would look better the other way aesthetically.
Aesthetically, I agree, but I think
actual football, that matters. Right. That's fair. So I have number 1, Shedeur Sanders, 2, Quinn Ewers, which I already kind of regret, 3, Jalen Milroe, 4, Cam Ward, 5, Dillon Gabriel.
And I have Cam Ward, number 1, Shedeur, number 2, Jalen Milroe, 3, Quinn Ewers, 4, Carson Beck, 5.
There you have it.
And there it is. So you can think of this as the warm-up to Rankings 2.0. Like, it's fun to talk about quarterbacks. There's maybe some fun ones on the top, or at least interesting ones on the top, and then it gets a little weird. But this is only the tip of the iceberg of the 2025 Dynasty rookie class, because we're not even really talking about Dynasty either with these guys, because I'm like, where am I even picking these guys in this class? It's not, it's nowhere near the first round, I'll tell you that. So
yeah, a lot will change when we see, because like a lot of these guys are going to be very dependent on where they end up and if they have a shot at starting, because if the NFL has a different perception than us on like Milroe, and Milroe ends up somewhere where he's expected to start year 1, it's like, okay, now you got to at least think about that, because that's kind of how we felt about Bo Nix, where we were like, Bo Nix, like, whatever. We don't know how to feel about Bo Nix. And then Bo Nix goes to the Broncos at like 10. And we both were still like, whatever, we don't want anything to do with him. But now Bo Nix is a very like startable guy week in and week out. So that's where things will change, where if something very like unexpected like that happens, then they'll have to shift the rankings. But until then, I feel all right kind of pushing these guys to the back burner and worrying about the positional players.
Amen. And I'm excited to talk about our skill guys this year, because next week, Rankings 2.0 will continue with running backs. And I'm thinking 10 would be a good place to start with this class, because we know how many names there are. We'll see if we get any new nuggets about who's in, who's out type of stuff. But everybody's been in so far. I mean, I don't think we've lost a single name yet. So it's looking.
5 isn't breaking any new ground with the running backs. It's just talking about guys we've been talking about.
Yeah. So we're going to get very deep. This is our opportunity to really dive into this group. We know about Genty. We even know about guys like Hampton, Judkins. We've talked plenty about those guys. Let's get really deep. Let's figure out the depth of this class, because we know how much depth matters specifically at the running back position. We're seeing it in the NFL this year. So let's get past this quarterback episode. Let's get back to greener pastures. But if you enjoyed our discussion about quarterbacks, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok. But TikTok it's done, right? Like it's gone in like a few days.
I don't know. I'll be on it till it's gone. until the U.S. government comes
until they take it out of my cold
phone.
Dead hands.
Until they uninstall it from my phone.
Yeah,
that's when it'll be done. But.
So you can follow us there if you want, I guess. But be sure to head over to YouTube as well and hit subscribe if you are listening on the pod feed, of course. And if you are watching on YouTube, you could head over to the pod feed maybe and drop us a like, a rate, a rating, a review. You could share it. I mean, do whatever you want to do, man. But it's, this is the best time of the year right now is diving into film and understanding what this class looks like.
And Christmas.
And that too, I guess. Yeah.
Most wonderful time of the year, you might say.
Oh yeah, that whole thing, right?
Right.
They don't write songs about draft season, but they could. They should.
They should.
But
somebody get on that.
Yeah. But we will be back next week to talk about running backs. So thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.